Hi, everybody. Sorry, 3 seconds. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dominic Stiller. This is the second meeting of 2025 of the Queens CB1 Transportation Committee meetings. Today is Wednesday, March 12th at 6:30. Meeting is by Zoom, and I will first take attendance. So I will do it over here. So just say your name, please. Say yes if you're here, pardon me. Kian Betancourt.
Yes.
Antonella DiSeverio.
Yes.
Adam Cox.
Yep.
Shahnaz Hamde.
Yes.
Yu Ma.
Yes.
Hi, you. Tom Ryan.
Yes.
Bobby Feltau, hello.
Yes.
Daniel Aliberti. Christina Lastris. Amin Mahedi. Nas Magutas.
Here.
Hey, Nas. Dominic Stiller here. And I'd just like to note who's here from CB1, but from the full board, Evie Hanzopoulos. Is anyone else here from the full board?
Patricia Maecha.
Let me write your name down, Patricia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Patricia Mahecha.
Correct.
Thanks. Okay. No one else? Okay. So we have a few things on the agenda tonight. The first presentation is by New York City DOT Queens liaison. I'd like you to give your formal title, Joseph, when you get the floor. That's Joseph Patty, regarding a presentation on safety improvements on Project 51. Safety improvement project at 51st Street. Sorry, I lost a comma. Between Northern Boulevard and 31st Avenue, installation of pedestrian crossing improvements, bus stop enhancements, protected bike lane infrastructure. Joseph Patty has with him Ben Schwed and Rachel Metz of DOT. So thank you so much for visiting our committee, and please share and present.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll just start off real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Ben and Rachel. My name is Joseph Patty. I'm the borough planner for Western Queens for NYC DOT. Cover community boards 1, 2, and 5. And today we're gonna, as Dominic just mentioned, we're gonna be presenting a upcoming safety improvement project on 51st Street from Northern Boulevard to 31st Avenue. This is a corridor we'd like to focus on because of some safety concerns we had. This is high crash area, high killed or severely injured area that we'd like to, introduce some of our safety improvements to. I won't try to steal all the time away from Ben and Rachel, so I hand it over to them.
Great. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Dominic, and to the board for having us tonight. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Schwed. I'm an assistant director with the Safety Projects and Programs team at the New York City Department of Transportation. And as you've heard, we're talking about 51st Street tonight, though I might start calling it Project 51, kind of makes it sound cooler. This is a section of 51st Street between Northern Boulevard and 31st Avenue that first came on our radar because of Vision Zero. There's a Vision Zero priority geography in this portion of 51st Street is a Vision Zero priority geography and intersection at 51st Street and Broadway. Kind of unfortunately due to the high rate of pedestrian severe injuries that we had seen on 51st Street. We started looking at it because of that, and we're kind of noting that there's some difficulties with the existing conditions of the roadway. And we had also seen, once we started talking to our Queens team, there were requests from the NYCHA campus there for traffic calming and improving the bus stops there. So we have this proposal tonight that Rachel will go through with you guys that'll really help to organize the roadway, to create predictability for everybody on the road, make it safer while also providing a really important bike connection for cyclists using it. So it's a safety project with bike lanes. With that, I'll turn it over to Rachel Metz, the project manager, who will walk you through some more of the specifics of our proposal tonight. So thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much, everyone, for having us. I'm going to share my screen so I can pull up the presentation. All right. Okay, I can't see the chat now, so if there are any, visual issues or anything, please just speak up. All right, so Ben started us off as well as Joe. So my name is Rachel Metz. I'm part of a team at DOT called Research, Implementation, and Safety, and what we focus on is safety. So we look at the crash data across the 5 boroughs, focus on locations in the city with the highest number of crashes, particularly severe crashes, and say, what can we do here to make it safer? So 51st Street here in Woodside is one of those locations, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's look at some of the project, or just looking at the project limits. You can see on the north side is 31st Ave. On the south side is Northern Boulevard. The west side of 51st Street from 31st Ave until Broadway is NYCHA Woodside houses. The Q18 bus runs southbound along 51st Street on that same stretch from 31st Ave until it makes a left on Broadway. There are also multiple nearby schools in the area, including PS 151, William Cullen Bryant High School. There's a child care center close to 31st Ave, and there's a new high school being constructed on Northern Boulevard between 51st and Broadway. Broadway is also a local truck route, and Northern Boulevard is a through truck route. And overall, across 51st Street, they're just wide intersections with heavy pedestrian traffic. So let's look at the safety data here. So first, as Ben noted a few minutes ago, we started looking at this because of the Vision Zero priority geography. So as he noted, 51st and Broadway right here is a Vision Zero priority intersection, and the whole corridor is in a Vision Zero priority area. So if you look at this injury summary table, we can see the range of injuries that happened on this corridor over a 5-year period from 2019 to 2023. You can see here that there were 93 total injuries, and 23 of those were pedestrian injuries. And then on the right side, the last column is KSI. And KSI is an internal measure we use at DOT. It stands for persons killed or severely injured. And we use this measure to focus on severe crashes in order to target our resources. So on this corridor during that 5-year period, there were 5 KSI, so 5 severe crashes, 3 of which were pedestrian. 1 was a bicyclist, which unfortunately was a fatality at 51st and 31st Ave in 2020, and 1 was a motor vehicle occupant. And in general, across the corridor, some of the issues that we see are pedestrian and vehicle turning conflicts. So when a vehicle is turning and a pedestrian is crossing the street. Speeding is also a concern on the corridor, and there have been numerous failure to yield crashes. Nearly 60% of all pedestrian injuries were due to that. So that's when a pedestrian is crossing the street and the vehicle comes into the intersection and fails to yield to the pedestrian in the crosswalk. So let's look at some of the existing conditions on the corridor. So first, unpredictable vehicle movements. This is a photo taken at Broadway. So there's frequent double parking along this corridor, which you can see in this photo because there are there's frequent double parking here. And the double parking happening here is happening in an active travel lane. So there are 2 southbound travel lanes here, both of which are active travel lanes. And the double parking is happening in one of them closer to the curb, and that's an indicator to us of excess capacity. So vehicles are stopping in that lane. Then as they move into the other travel lane, it's unpredictable for all road users. The next issue that we saw was a vehicle misuse of lanes. So this is at 31st Ave. This is looking at vehicles going north. There's actually only 1 active travel lane. There's 1 northbound lane, and vehicles here are using it as 2 lanes. There's also pedestrian and vehicle conflicts on the corridor. So this is a photo at 32nd Ave of this vehicle turning into the crosswalk as a pedestrian is crossing. And as noted earlier, nearly 60% of pedestrian injuries on this corridor were due to vehicles' failure to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. Also here at 32nd Ave, the bus stop, the Q18 bus stops in the crosswalk, so right in this intersection, pulls into the crosswalk, which blocks the crosswalk for other pedestrians. And additionally, this pedestrian signal here is misaligned with the crosswalk. So typically when you cross the crosswalk, you'd see the pedestrian signal in the spot of this existing bus sign. So it's visible, but in this case, it's over to the side. There's also long pedestrian crossing distances on the corridor. It's 55 feet or even a few feet more than that for much of it. That's just a long way for a pedestrian to cross. And then a lack of bike facilities. So in this photo, you can see at 31st Ave, this cyclist is trying to cross the street right next to a truck. So we'll talk about the proposed conditions for this safety project. And so as I list all of these, please know there will be photos and good visuals on the next couple slides, but I'm going to go through all of our proposed conditions first. So the first is to remove one of the southbound travel lanes to better organize the roadway for all road users, encourage safer travel speeds, and calm traffic. So as mentioned, and we'll show in a video, there are currently 2 southbound travel lanes and 1 northbound lane. Next, install pedestrian islands at 31st Ave, at 32nd Ave, and at Broadway to shorten those crossing distances and encourage slower and safer turns onto 51st Street. Next is a bus stop consolidation and installing a bus boarding island at 32nd Ave, which is shown in this photo, to improve bus rider safety and accessibility. Also install leading pedestrian intervals, which are a timing change in the intersection at both 32nd Ave and Northern Boulevard to give pedestrians a conflict-free head start. And then our bike facilities install a parking protected bike lanes along the corridor to provide a safe cycling connection. So this will include a 2-way bike lane from 31st Ave to 32nd Ave and 1-way bike lanes from 32nd Ave to Northern Boulevard, and installing northbound standard bike lane from 32nd Ave to 31st Ave, which will be shown in the visuals in the following slides. So one note here about protected bike lane safety. So in 2022, DOT released a report called Pedestrian Safety and Older New Yorkers, which was a study that analyzed the impact of protected bike lanes on safety for roadway users. And it showed that protected bike lane designs are proven to calm traffic and improve safety for all roadway users. So pedestrians, cyclists, motor vehicle users, everyone who uses the road. And safety improvements associated with protected bike lanes were most impactful for the most vulnerable roadway users. So just to give a little bit of that data, in terms of its impact on all roadway users, there was nearly a 15% injury reduction, total injuries, and 16% KSI reduction, so that's severe injuries. For pedestrians, there was nearly an 18% injury reduction, 29% KSI or severe injury reduction, and for senior pedestrians, some of our most vulnerable roadway users, there was a 22% injury reduction and 39% KSI reduction. And before we go into the visuals on the proposal about the bike network in this part of Queens, so you can see our safety project limits over to the bottom right in red. There's an important north-south cycling gap between 31st Ave and Northern Boulevard right now. City Bike expanded to the area in 2021, and there's been an ongoing bike and public realm project that some of you may know about, a protected bike lane on 31st Ave. They've done extensive planning and outreach in CB1, including workshops, an online survey, and merchant surveys. And the first phase was completed in 2024 from Vernon Boulevard to 31st Street. And then upcoming is from 31st Street to 51st Street, which is highlighted here in the purple. So now we're going to look at some of the visuals I mentioned. This is kind of a cross section. We're going to look at cross sections across the corridor of what the existing conditions are and the proposed conditions are. So this first one is from 32nd Ave to Northern Boulevard. It's the bulk of the corridor. You can see in the existing condition, we have 2 southbound travel lanes. One is shared with the parking lane, and 1 northbound travel lane and parking lane. And the proposed conditions is putting protected bike lanes on each side and a lane reduction for southbound vehicles. So removing one of the southbound lanes, we still have the parking lanes on both sides and the protected bike lanes. And then at two of the intersections on the corridor, at Northern Boulevard and at Broadway, we would have, still have the protected bike lanes, but also have a right turn lane. And here, this really, the turn bays here, turn bay as we call them, leads to more predictability in movements. It kind of organizes the road more. It reduces conflicts in vehicles that are turning, and organizes vehicle movements overall, since all vehicles in that lane are making the same movement. So here that really organizes movements in these intersections. And then on the northern portion from 31st Ave to 32nd Ave, we have a two-way protected bike lane on the west curb and a northbound conventional bike lane on the northbound side, and still the lane reduction for southbound vehicles. So we still have a parking lane on each side and one travel lane on each side. So here's some of an aerial, we're going to look at like aerial kind of overhead views of what this looks like. So here on the southern portion from Northern Boulevard to Broadway, you can see the southbound right turn bay to accommodate vehicles here and organize traffic. As mentioned earlier, a leading pedestrian interval in the intersection for pedestrians crossing over Northern Boulevard to give them a conflict-free head start. So that's when pedestrians can start crossing before vehicles get the green light. And then parking protected bike lanes on each side shown here in green to provide a safe cycling route with physical barriers between cyclists and traffic. And here that is the parking lane. Moving slightly north up to Broadway. So we still have the protected bike lanes here shown in green. And then over here in the southwest corner, a painted pedestrian island to shorten pedestrian crossing distances and encourage slower and safer turns onto 51st Street. Also moving north on the northbound side, a northbound left turn ban onto Broadway to reduce conflicts and simplify vehicle movements. There are not very many northbound left turns during peak hours of the day, only 13 in the morning, 25 in the afternoon, evening hour. So that, won't make much of a difference there in terms of conflicts for folks. Also, daylighting here to improve visibility of crossing pedestrians. So that's leaving some space before the intersection so vehicles don't park right up to the crosswalk and pedestrians can see, and vehicles can see pedestrians there. And then, as mentioned, at Northern Boulevard, a southbound right turn bay to reduce conflicts and organize vehicle movements. And at this intersection, 10 parking spots would be repurposed with all of these treatments. Moving north to 32nd Ave, here's where the bus boarding islands come in, as mentioned earlier. So we'd install a concrete bus boarding island and pedestrian island to shorten pedestrian crossing distances, provide an accessible bus stop, and remove the existing bus stop from the crosswalk and to improve safety and accessibility for bus riders. There would also be a leading pedestrian interval here, so that timing change in the intersection to give pedestrians a conflict-free head start. They can start crossing before vehicles get the green light. And then here's our transition from the two-way protected bike lane, as shown with the green on both sides of 51st Street, transition from the one-way into the two-way on the west curb here, and then we'd have a one-way conventional bike lane on the northbound side to connect with the bike lane on 31st Ave moving east. And here at this intersection, 4 parking spots would be repurposed with these treatments. And then lastly, up at 31st Ave, so as mentioned with the bike lane, so this two-way bike lane on the west curb will connect with the 31st Ave protected bike lane. The northbound standard bike lane would connect to the eastbound 31st Ave bike lane. We would, and as mentioned with the bus, there's a consolidation of the Q18 bus stop coordinated through the Queens Bus Network redesign. There'd be a painted pedestrian island at this corner to shorten pedestrian crossing distances and expand the pedestrian refuge space. There would be updated lane markings to organize the roadway for all road users and create more predictable movements. And then lastly, the lane reduction here, removing one of the southbound lanes, organizes the roadway for all road users. It encourages safer travel speeds and it calms traffic. And at this part of the corridor, 3 parking spots are gained with these treatments. So here's an example of what the proposed conditions might look like at one of our projects in Brooklyn, Garrettson Ave and Everett Ave. You can see the bus boarding island here that provides passengers with a safe and level boarding area, and it shortens crossing distance for pedestrians. This two-way bike lane that allows for safer bicycle travel, and a lane reduction here, removing one of the travel lanes, organizes the roadway and reduces speeding. And overall, the project benefits here. Here's an example of one of our projects on Soundview Ave in the Bronx. They improve predictability and organization for motor vehicle users. It increases pedestrian visibility and accessibility, facilitates shorter and safer pedestrian crossings, facilitates slower and safer turns onto 51st Street and off 51st Street, which improves yielding to pedestrians and cyclists, and providing safer and more convenient bicycle travel and providing connection to existing bike infrastructure in the area. And with that, we're happy to open it up to any questions. Oh, sorry, showing for me. Adam.
Dom, are you trying to unmute?
So I've just unmuted, and
Okay.
my mouse actually died, and so I've just plugged it in, so it didn't die. It got an organ transplant, Shahnaz. So so yeah, sure. So I'm gonna just write the names down in order, and I didn't catch all the hands; they all whipped up. So I'm gonna say Adam, Kian, Antonella, Tom, in that order. Everyone else who's on the committee, please raise your hand. Evie, you wanna jump the queue since you're the chair, or do you want to not jump the queue? No. Good, I wouldn't either. Adam, we're interested in what you have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. Overall, this seems like a total no-brainer, making a good connection between a couple projects that will be very important. And also appreciate a lot of the thoughtful decisions to. I'm not a huge fan of transitioning from like two sides bike lane to one, but it really does make sense how it feeds into that 31st Avenue lane, and yeah, feels really nicely considered. The one question I did have was about, I didn't see a visual of any changes on the southbound side of the intersection with 51st and Northern Boulevard. That's a rough crossing as a pedestrian, and then also thinking about a cyclist who's coming southbound on 51st, trying to make, what would that be, a left turn then onto eastbound Northern Boulevard. Doesn't seem to be like a great place to stop and wait to make the second piece of that crossing, and I'm wondering if that's something considered in this plan, something that could be added to this plan to clearly delineate where a cyclist should wait to make the second phase of that turn, and not be in the path of some pretty dangerous feeling, wide roads there.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing just to address quickly with the intersection of 51st and Northern Boulevard is I think it's worth like reiterating the addition of a leading pedestrian interval at that intersection, right? So that's where the walk sign goes to walk before any vehicles can move and lets you start crossing the street conflict free and really like establishes pedestrians in the crosswalk first. So that's like that, and bikes are legally allowed to use those like pedestrian signals in cases like that. In terms of like for bikes that might be turning to get from southbound to eastbound, it's a little bit tough geometrically to fit in an actual like what we call bike turn box on the receiving side. But we'll continue to work with our engineers to see if that's something that can be added just to make it more clear where they can safely wait at that intersection.
Yeah, thank you. I just really do want to emphasize how nice this connection is, but that piece is going to feel incredibly dangerous if I have to kind of like wait in traffic somewhere or feel like I can't. There is that kind of pork chop sidewalk island thing, maybe just even painting there so it's just clear where that's supposed to go. It could be like a easy enough spot to put it, but it can kind of feel like you have nowhere to go in that sort of situation, especially on a street like Northern. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Adam. Kian, please.
Is there any way we'd be able to pull the presentation back up? Just it just may be easier to describe if we have the visual.
Sorry, my camera was being weird. I'm going to pull it back up and reshare.
In the meantime, I can ask questions that aren't required of the map. I just have two quick questions. One is regarding the daylighting, and the pedestrian islands. Is there anything that's going to be physically blocking that? Because as I've seen a lot in the past on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, for instance, there's a tendency for a lot of drivers to park on those, and frankly, a reluctancy from the NYPD to enforce when that happens. So are those going to be blocked off with like bike corrals or anything like that?
As much as feasible, yes.
Okay. And then my only other question, actually, just a small secondary question. What is the purpose of retaining the conventional bike lane when you have the two-way one on the other side?
So we wanted to make sure that if you're riding northbound and you want to continue eastbound on 31st Avenue, that you're able to do that directly. We want to provide that option so you don't have to cross to the west side of the street and then cross again at 31st Avenue. So it's kind of gives that more direct access for northbound to eastbound cyclists.
Makes sense. I guess just a small request, if we can, is just about every conventional bike lane I've ever seen in the city sits squarely in the door zone. So if there's any way that we could even inch that out a little bit further, I think it has the dual benefit of kind of narrowing the lane with respect to traffic calming, but also keeping the cyclist safe. I think that would obviously be ideal if there is room for it. My primary question and final one here is, could we go to the prior slide?
Yes.
The one before that, actually. Okay. So on that north side, on the right-hand side, just a quick observation here. I was curious about, there is that like little red line by the right turn bay. Yeah, kind of where your mouse is on there you go. So I have seen these where cars kind of quickly jump to cut off cyclists that generally have the right of way there. Is there, firstly, what is protecting the cyclists on that right turn lane? Is it going to be flex posts? Is there going to be a Jersey barrier? And then more so, is there anything slowing them down on that right turn? I see it in Manhattan often where you have, either armadillos or even flex posts or whatever it is that just makes for a more angular right turn for more visibility. Is there any plan to install that there?
Yeah, so that red line is our quick curb, which is our kind of like more sturdier posts that you'll see to provide that protection for cyclists. So there is actually a physical separation between the right turning cars and the bikes.
Oh, is that what's on 11th Street by the Pulaski, that new one?
I believe so. I'm not
It's like
totally.
a little curb.
Oh,
Okay.
no. So 11th Street has like a small concrete curb. That's not this. This is like essentially
Okay.
it's still a plastic post, but it's more it's sturdier than like our plastic delineators that you often see. So it's a more real protection.
And then as for the like turning radius, is there any plans to put anything in there?
We'll work on that with our designers. The main thing here is that it's a tighter turn because you'll be closer to the curb, so it's a tighter angle than it is currently. As well as by providing the right turn bay, you're organizing the roadway so you don't feel this pressure to get out of the way. I think mainly it's going to be, because they'll be next to cyclists, I believe it'll just be the tighter geometry forcing a slower, safer turn where you are more likely to yield both to cyclists and pedestrians.
Okay. If I can have any suggestion, it would be nice to have even something there that can slow them down. Hear what you're saying with the tight angle here, but just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Kian. Antonella, please.
I had a question. I know that Northern Boulevard is pretty congested around rush hour time, and now it looks like where it's probably going to get worse. Where do you anticipate that all this overflow is how is it going to affect the side street, the side roads where you have residential houses? Have you accounted for that?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So we do extensive traffic modeling of any project like this where there's any reduction in capacity on a roadway. The overall volumes on 51st Street, we feel confident that they can be accommodated in one southbound lane for most of this without having impacts to the surrounding network. With that said, you can, here you can see there's kind of this large-ish two lanes approaching Northern Boulevard here, because we do need that extra space to make sure that everyone is able to get through without having to find alternate routes. So our modeling that's like part of the reason that we have these we go up to 2 lanes at the approach for Northern Boulevard, is to make sure that we're accommodating all of the volumes at this location. And that's comes directly from, our traffic counts that we take during the busiest hours of the day and our traffic modeling software to make sure that we're accommodating vehicles.
Okay. And just to follow up, if it turns out that it doesn't work as expected, will you make modifications after, like, what point?
Yeah, we always want to give projects time to let them settle in, make sure people are adjusting to them. We're always monitoring our projects both from a safety perspective as well as from an operational perspective. So, and things especially like adjusting signal timing to help make sure people get through intersections. Those are really quick fixes that we can do. There's not a set amount of time, but we're always monitoring and ready to make adjustments should we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I get to know what Tom, Brian.
All right. First thing, I know you've said it a few times, but I still don't understand the logic of having the one-way across the street from the two-way, where the one-way would be safer because you would prevent people having to cross the street, at each intersection, Northern, 32nd and 31st. Why wouldn't it be better to have the double bike lane on one side, especially when it's against the woodside houses, and you'll have less, contact between, why can't you do the two-way on the one side of the street from 31st to Northern Boulevard on the west side?
Yeah, sure. So the challenges with two-way bike lanes have kind of unique challenges in terms, particularly where there are turns across them, right? And where there are turns going across a two-way bike lane, where like there would be at especially at the Broadway intersection here, we need to make sure that any turns that would go across a two-way bike lane would be fully protected, which is to say that we wouldn't be comfortable having turning vehicles go across a two-way bike lane because of the challenges for drivers there. So that's the reason kind of that we have the paired one-way bike lanes here, where we feel we can more safely have turns across the bike lanes at the intersections. And this way, it also the kind of combination of the two-way in this northern portion and then the one-way pairs as you go further south allows for better and safer connections for cyclists within the existing bike network, while also like making sure that drivers are able to interact safely with bikes at the intersections.
Okay. I don't agree with you, but okay. Second thing, when you put up all these raised platforms or whatever, can you put something there that, especially for a car who's driving, I'm an auto driver, that is reflective and high enough so I see it coming before the last moment?
We
so
can,
because you usually put those like white squares, and it's like you're pretty much on top of it. You'll notice as time goes on, cars tend to knock those off because they don't see it to the last moment. So a more reflective, higher post, so you see it, down the street as opposed to coming onto the intersection, would be better. Something that's reinforced better, because so much of the stuff you guys put up just get knocked down, and then it's not replaced.
Yeah.
So just a comment. The other thing for all these cars, because another problem with the cars, with all the people hitting all the intersections, they're usually waiting to the last moment to make the turn, and usually they're making the turn with the lights changing. Can you put in a dedicated turn signal for these cars at one point of it so they can go across safely and not feel like they're rushing to make the left or right turn?
Yeah, we can look at that with our signals teams to see if there are places where we can accommodate turn signals.
Because that would be nice. The other thing is, this is a pet peeve wherever we are. The street lighting is getting worse and worse. We have these LED headlights, headlights, bulbs or whatever. They don't properly illuminate the roadway, especially the intersections. And I don't understand why we can't have street lights that light the street. And especially in this corridor here, this is one example of many. It's very dark, the few posts you have, there are trees growing around it, and everything is 24 hours. So I'd like to see more improved and brighter street lighting.
We're gonna try to get a committee meeting to discuss that. It's a little, the lighting on this install is interesting. It's a good question if you can touch on that, Ben, but in general, we hope to discuss street lighting and how it relates to the streets in the coming months. Ben, do you have any comments about the
Okay.
street lighting?
Uh,
Last question.
Not specifically as part of this project, no. We can put in a request, you can also like, I know Joe, who's the liaison, can take any requests for specific areas that you want us to look at as an agency.
Yeah,
Okay, but you've never heard any other similar comments from similar to Tom's just now?
Well, I haven't heard comments about this, corridor specifically. I mean,
No.
if there is like specific areas you'd like us to study for additional, that can be an easy request.
All right.
That
Got
can be
it.
passed along to
And
us.
that's a
Let me-
subject matter. That's all over. The other thing is too.
Tom, I'm sorry. In the interest of time, make it your last question, your last comment, and let's move on.
Okay. Well, I'm saying things of safety that are important here. The other thing is when you're putting posts to calm the cars to make you turn, you put the post so the car literally has to make a 90-degree movement. The car doesn't move in 90 degrees. So the one that's on the corner, can you set the little back so the car can make a curve instead of a 90-degree, which is, a car doesn't do that. It's not set up to do that. So, so even though you're giving it a slowdown, that it can make a curved turn instead of a 90-degree turn, which does not make sense.
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
Yep, I'll just, we aim to strike the balance of encouraging, like, especially when there are turns across bike lanes or busy crosswalks, we
I
want to
understand.
encourage that. So, we have our standards that we work with our design engineers on to make sure that things are being installed in ways that allow the turns to be made, but at those safer speeds to encourage yielding.
All right.
Thanks, man.
One more statement.
Tom, I'm gonna.
But just let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay, I'm gonna be like the
Let me
sergeant.
finish.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Look, one other last rule between pedestrians, autos, bikes, everything. If everyone doesn't follow the rules, all this stuff is for naught. And if people try to rush the light, or cars try to turn after the light, or bikes just do whatever, those for naught. That's another thing. We need a better way to get people to do the right thing. So that's my comment.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tom. It's much appreciated. You make some good comments.
Yes, thank you.
So Evie, and then Bobby, and then myself, I have a few comments to stem out of these meetings. So Evie?
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm just curious as to what the outreach plan is for the surrounding community.
Yeah, right. So we're gonna we're meeting with NYCHA and soon to talk about this project, but then otherwise we're talking to elected officials, the community board, and going to talk to the Woodside houses soon.
Yeah, I can speak a little more on that too. We had our elected official briefing earlier this week. We were planning to go to Woodside House's monthly meeting. We were trying to do this month, but we had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so we're going to be going next month to them. But even before we had all this, we did meet with some people from Woodside Houses and did a little survey of the area, and they let us know some of the safety concerns they had in and around this corridor. Which weren't limited to just 51st Street. I know someone mentioned the south side of the intersection of Northern and 51st was something we wanted to look at too. And also, we're going to be continuing our outreach regardless with 31st Ave, even beyond this project. So this area is going to be having a lot of our attention over the next few months.
Great, thank you.
Heavy, your comment about outreach is considering we get to a point where, oh, should have had more outreach, didn't have enough outreach, had too much outreach. Do you, Joseph, do you see this being a contentious meeting at Woodside Houses and in the area? Do you guys looking forward to it?
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. We've already have a good, relationship established with Woodside Houses, the tenants association there. We're just there to essentially listen to see what the needs are. We're going to try to, give as much, attention as we can to all the surrounding streets in there, because there are a lot of issues we heard about outside of just what this project would be that we want to try to tackle with them. So hope to make it more of a collaborative relationship over the next few months.
Thanks. I'd like to let Bobby make his comments. Thanks, Bob.
Hey, this is Paula from New York City DOT. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my camera. I just want to add that we've done quite a bit of outreach last 2 years. We even have pop-up events by the site on 31st. We collect a lot of feedback that it's, the proposal like responds directly to some of the concerns that we heard. So just want to add that like we've been doing outreach for the last couple years in this area.
Thank you, Paula. Appreciate it. Bobby?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was great. And obviously so many of these safety improvements are very impactful. I was wondering, my one question was, will there be any more, any changes or additional parking for bikes or micromobility devices as a result of these projects at different intersections? Because we talked about parking spots gained and lost in some of these slides, but I assume that did mean like vehicle parking on the street, right?
Yeah, the parking that we talked about was for vehicle parking. We can always look into getting additional bike racks or things of that nature, both as part of this project or separate from this project. You guys can always feel free to request bike parking.
I would like to request bike parking because it is helpful and important. So thank you.
Noted.
Nas, I'm gonna go after you and I'm gonna be last. So Nas, hi.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. Just a quick one. The area that keeps the conventional bike lanes so that you have that connection on 31st Ave, you said. I'm just curious, is it such that the geometry doesn't allow for a single protected to continue that way? I guess it looks like I'm looking at Google Maps, a little hard to get a sense of the scale. So yeah, just curious about thoughts on why that stays conventional in that particular section as opposed to being a protected.
Yeah, we don't have enough space for a two-way protected lane on the west side and a one-way protected lane on the east side. So, and where we have that conventional northbound lane on that one block, that's what the geometry allows us for.
Okay, thanks.
You didn't speak yet. Do you have a comment or two? I guess
do,
my hand was
yes.
up. It might have been blocked by one of my
No,
markers.
it just went up. Thank you. Could we go back to the slide where it meets Northern? Yes. So similar to Kian's feedback, I think the drivers turning right here onto Northern are probably going to cut and go as close to the curb as possible, and that's going to be tough for both pedestrians and for cyclists. So if there's any way you can sort of make it harder or make them go around, I think it'll be safer for everyone.
Noted. Thank you.
Adam, quick final comment, Adam, before I make a few comments.
Yeah, I just had a question. This slide is actually good to show this. Also, the next slide. There's some areas here where you've done daylighting with just like painted stripes and then I guess that quick curb in there. If you go to slide 17, I'm curious like what the distinction is in the choice to use the truffle paint on this like top left corner here and create a pedestrian area versus not doing that where, to my eye, it looks like you could do the same thing on the other two intersections where you have the stripes here. back on 16 at Northern Boulevard, it feels like the striped daylighting area here on the kind of near, I guess that would be the eastbound side of 51st Street, could potentially be some protective space for pedestrians that could also make some of these crossings shorter. So I'm just curious kind of about the reasoning for when we use the brown paint and make an area versus just stripe it off for no parking.
Yeah, the short version answer to that is it's based off the turn geometries. If we have the space to do that, it's our preference to do that to, further calm turns and shorten those crossing distances where we do the striping and the plastic post, the quick curb. That's our attempt to really provide that visibility for turns over the bike lane, encourage them to be slower and safer, but the turns need more space than we can provide if we were to have the painted pedestrian islands.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So I've got a few points. Number one, to follow up on Adam's comment right now on that slide. So you're heading westbound on Northern and you choose for some reason I can't think of to go backwards on North on 51st Street. So you're making a big dogleg to the right. And it kind of implies that you're to drive in that outer second lane from this white striping on the first lane. Just looking at it from as a vehicle driver. See that, Ben? How if the idea is you don't drive where the white stripes are, or do you drive where the white stripes are? I don't know. It's sure. You see my point?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, the idea would be is to establish that lane. And it would be to, I think if you're making that right turn, you would probably turn across that kind of channelized area there. But I think I see the point, and worth keeping in mind that what we're showing you are kind of proposals, not finalized designs. So like perhaps the way that the striped area is shown here could be adjusted a little bit, but the idea would be to, that space is really for the turn, and then you're supposed to establish in the travel lane next to the double yellow center line.
Understood. Right. It's not to guide you into the right lane. Secondly, if you look at this,
I was just going to note there. This is the car wash area, and so because this is essentially one long driveway, that's why it looks kind of like there's a second northbound lane, but it's really because it's adjacent to the driveways.
Thanks, Rachel. So just real quick, on Northern Boulevard here, westbound, the green is not extending into the intersection. But if you go to slide, I think it was 19, but it was the 32nd Avenue. So you had somewhere the green was extending across the intersection, not here, maybe Broadway. Yeah, see how you've got, thank goodness, it's like music to my ears or to my eyes. You've got the green finally in the intersection crossing Broadway on both sides. You see that? So I wish you'd consider to not make the green disappear when you're cycling through the intersections. You see the difference?
Yeah.
You've got it on left to right, but not up and down. I'm sorry, just left and right. You've got it here. It's green. Going back to Northern, you don't. So I think it would be I'd like to advocate for the green going through that Northern Boulevard intersection there.
Yeah, noted. It's something that we now do with our protected bike lanes is when there are turns across them, we do continue the green bars through the intersection. So
that's a great big change, and I appreciate that personally. So number 2, LPI, great. Those are fantastic. I don't know why it took so long to get them installed. I know that if people make a phone call, DOT installs them. You guys, in my opinion, are making a great job installing those. My third comment about this presentation is you've got these raised bus loading havens or bus loading, islands. It would be just so great if some of these painted pedestrian havens, you call them, could also be raised, the same height as the sidewalk. And I'm talking about the tan islands, because I just think it shortens the crossing in a real way, not just in a painted way, because we all know that many of these painted implementations sometimes have real negative effects. That's the reality. Opposite of what's intended. I have one question a little broader about the region, which I'd like to just selfishly ask to Joe or the team. And that is, today I saw on Northern Boulevard and 39th Street Steinway, a woman trying to cross northbound across Northern, package in her arm, and the tractor trailer truck, cars, just so many cars turning right. She literally missed the entire light, and she almost died. I felt for her. I was on the other side just watching the whole thing. It was insane. Statistically, how does that intersection compare with this area? So we're talking about 30 Steinway and Northern, which leads onto that 39th Street Bridge.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that intersection. It's extremely busy. So that's definitely something I can look at to find out if there is, any kind of LPIs there. We could, take a closer look at it to see if there can be any kind of pedestrian improvements, whether that be like a bump out in any locations or just, any number of things that are in a toolkit. So that's an ongoing conversation we can have about that location. And if you have any suggestions as well, welcome any letters or cases you'd like to send over.
And how would we get that information to you?
Well, best way to have the board write a letter if you have any specific requests for it.
Will do. Okay. Thanks. So, thanks, DOT. Do you have any more comments in the presentation, or should we consider it closed? So Ben?
Yeah, I think that's it for us.
Ben and Joe and Rachel, thanks so much. I think that you put a surprise. I always see these presentations, and I think it's really robust. It's really a robust design. It's radical, and I'm once again impressed. So that's great. Yep, thanks. And so we are going to move into part of our meeting, new business, where we're going to discuss daylighting. So DOT, if you have the time to stick around, it would be fantastic. We can get right to it in the out of respect for your time, but
I can stick around for that.
That's great, Joe. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
And
Rachel
then,
and I are going to hop off, but thanks so much and Joe can talk to you guys about daylighting. So thanks
Ben.
everybody.
Nice meeting you, Ben.
Thanks, everyone.
So where's my notes? My notes. Okay. So we'll get right to it. And the board received a letter from a resident named John Sirico, who I see is in the room in the lower left of my screen. Oh, you moved. Hey, Joe. Hey, John. Nice to meet you. And the letter was about prioritizing daylighting in specific locations across our community board. And it kind of picks up and brings to the table the resolution that we made last June or last June by Adam Fisher Cox about daylighting, which we voted on and passed. Maybe the first CB in Queens to do that. And so now it's about implementation, and so that's great. So John sent a letter that I can share, unless John wants to share. I don't know if you have the authority, the ability to share, John. So maybe I should just do it. I will. Let me close some things. Okay, sharing. Lawrence, can you make Alexis Slifkus a participant if she's not? It's Alexis there from Family Streets. Okay, thank you so much. So let me share screen 2. Do you see 3 pages of a Word doc? Is it large enough? No, it's not. Yes or no? Okay, I'll do my best. Okay, so John, please, I will be your hands. Please take over the audio.
Sure. Thanks, Dom, and thanks, DOT for sticking on. My name is John Sirico. I've been living in the neighborhood for over 10 years now. I also serve as the chairperson of the 31st Ave Open Street Collective, so I know the DOT officials well. I'm really excited to see the 51st Street project. This was not as my capacity as the chairperson of the collective, but really as just a private citizen who cares about street safety, and really following up the great work of this committee that, is truly pioneering. I mean, we now have over 20 community boards that have signed on to universal daylighting, which is really exciting. But this board was the first in the city, so it's really exciting to be here. This letter really followed up on that letter, kind of asking the community where they'd like to see daylighting in CB1. I did this outreach a number of ways. I hung up posters all over Astoria that asked folks if they could see cars coming at a certain corner. There was a survey that kind of allowed people to put in intersections, and I also posted it in numerous community forums. That being said, I've received about 136 responses at this count from citizens that really lived all over the district, asking them specifically where they wanted to see daylighting. I think this was also encouraged by the great work that's been done on Broadway in recent months, kind of following up on that, where else they'd like to see daylighting. I also with this, I purposely excluded intersections that are seeing daylighting. So there were some for Broadway, there was some for 31st Ave, but they're undergoing treatments right now. But kind of this was a distillation of what I received from people. We have, Dom, if you just go over to the map real quick. So just to kind of explain this map a little bit, we have the stars are specific locations that were described in the survey, and the yellow highlighted are corridors that people said they'd like to see the entire corridor daylit, so similar to Broadway. But I didn't want to just completely cover that in stars. So those are corridors where people felt unsafe, dangerous crossing, with families and strollers and older adults, have some pretty harrowing encounters described to me in the survey, which I also shared in the letter, that really describe, feeling unsafe going to Astoria Park, feeling unsafe crossing Broadway, feeling unsafe crossing 34th Ave and these other major corridors. So the kind of point of doing this was really to follow up on implementation and say to DOT, kind of like, we've reached out to the community, here's where they would love to see daylighting, and hope to get more corridor-wide treatments, I think similar to Broadway, where this is possible. So I think I kind of wanted to first raise it to this committee and also talk to DOT about next steps in terms of whether that's placing service requests through Florence and through the CB1 Transportation Committee, or also kind of getting more advocacy around that.
So you have a table here. So because my first thought, not to be critical, is this: the stars are they don't quantify how dense the requests were. They're kind of like, so did you touch on that? And I might have missed it, but one star is his location. But if you had, are there any areas that had multiple locations, John?
Yes, several. The two that come to mind are pretty much all the intersections on the southern side of Astoria Park by 21st Street and Hoyt Boulevard and Hoyt Avenue. That's a good call. I can definitely think through the map in terms of making stars bigger or smaller based on density.
Or put a number in the middle of them.
Yeah, sure. That specific intersection comes to mind, and overwhelmingly, the one that came up the most was the intersection in front of the Henry David Thoreau School on 30th Ave and 29th Street. It's the amount of encounters that people described at that intersection, especially parents when they're bringing their kids there. Yeah, exactly. That's why you see all the stars there. Is pretty enormous.
Okay. So it seems like when you look at the stars, it's tough to give a specific direction to DOT. How does this table work? Left to right, up and down? Roll the dice?
Not anything kind of specific order. This was just kind of arranging those intersections that I saw, that stood out. And then the map kind of more details them. I think I could definitely add the number of incidents or the number of kind of submissions based on those, or also number of priority, in terms of Vision Zero priority corridors, or ones that came up the most, right? Like the ones on 30th Ave. I think kind of going back to this point around the commercial corridors and corridor wide treatments, I think that's why I specifically went for the highlighting of treatments where people said, I'd actually love to see all of 28th Ave or all of 30th Ave get daylighting similar to Broadway.
So Avenue is primarily interesting, but I guess pretty understandable. It's a two-way streets, and it's busy. John.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's where the people felt the most unsafe, especially with trucks unloading, all the other things we see on our corridors.
Right. Okay. So before we open it up to questions, I would like to introduce Alexis Fiscus. Sorry, because I have this up, I don't see last name. I will stop sharing. Maybe I'll leave it up. But Alexis is an organizer from the Families for Safe Streets, and through someone who works with for Donovan Richards, she reached out to me, and I said this is, she called about this topic, not knowing tonight was this topic, and so I welcome her to speak and give a few words on her organization and daylighting specifically. So hi, Alexis.
Unmute myself. I can unmute myself. Hi. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I won't keep you super long, but I am, as Dominic said, I'm the organizer with Families for Safe Streets, which is an organization that is 100% made up of people who have been affected by traffic violence. I work with two social workers to provide support and help channel people's energy post-crash into advocacy to make the streets safe, so that what happened to them doesn't happen to anyone else ever again. All of our members have either lost a loved one to traffic violence or have themselves been injured. So I really applaud the work that this community board has done already on daylighting, and I am really encouraged by the really great questions that I heard and what you all are working on. And I just want to speak on behalf of a lot of your neighbors who of the 948 crashes who have been involved in the 948 crashes since the beginning of 2024, including seven who are no longer with us. This daylighting is huge. Visibility is a huge part of making our streets safe, and I think that it is the vast majority of crashes happen at intersections because that's where a lot of conflict is. Over 50% of crashes are at intersections. So I just really urge you all to continue with your great support of daylighting, and please know that Families for Safe Streets is here for you. Traffic violence touches all of us, even if you don't necessarily think it does. So we are here to provide support in English and Spanish, in person and virtual, for folks who have been impacted by traffic violence, whether they've been injured, whether they've lost a loved one, whether they're caring for someone who's been injured. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. Thanks very much, and thanks for the introduction to Families for Safe Streets, who we see at many advocacies. I'm sure we're all familiar, or many of us are familiar with that group and the necessary work that it does. Joe, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to see if there's any questions that come forth from the daylighting prioritization from John prior to giving you the floor. Does anyone have any questions at all about the daylighting, and any suggestions or questions about the turning the resolution into action? Bobby?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll just say
Use the non-yellow hand. Try to use the yellow hand whenever you can. Go ahead, Bobby.
Okay. Thanks for the presentation. Thought it went well, and just backing up that I would love to see the numbers on the spread, like we already talked about. I bet that's cool.
I'm sorry. Too vague for me. Explain, Bobby. Numbers on the spreadsheet, numbers on the spread.
Just saying the results on a per location representation.
Understood.
Like the heat map.
Understood.
Yeah, talking about it.
Gotcha. I thought it was something from 51st Street. Adam. So we're going to go Adam, you, Evie. Sorry, Evie. So Adam, Nas. Sorry. Adam, you, Nas, Evie. Okay? Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, John, for putting this together and doing all the outreach. It's really, yeah, good to see like actual community suggestions from this. Also echo the interest in kind of seeing the actual heat map of kind of where those were. I think that would be just a great thing to hand off to DOT. I'm sure they also have information, other heat map type of information about Vision Zero priority areas, traffic fatalities and crashes, and this can just be another great data point to that. And I think we can reinforce this need by sending a letter and saying that we as a board kind of want to uplift these voices from the community and send these suggestions along as more than just individual 311 requests, but kind of a message from the board as well. And I think that can be really useful as DOT is hopefully prioritizing more daylighting in the year to come.
So let's kick around that specifically after people make their comments regarding the timing and the content of that and the presentation. Thanks, Adam. You?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, John. Excellent work. I really appreciate all the organizing that you've done here. Also, just want to echo, love to see some numbers. I think actually one of the pieces of feedback I had given last year with our resolution, which was amazing, was that we could be more specific. And you've done the work here. So now we are more specific. And if we had a list, maybe in ranked decreasing order or something like that, I don't want to make you do more free work for us. But yeah, just like a solid ask of like, here are the 10 most requested intersections. And I think that would be like a great ask in a potential resolution.
Thanks, you. And John, I think it's really important. Hopefully you've kept all your questionnaires and your emails and so forth, so you have it all when as backup, because I think that means a lot. So Nas, please.
Hey, yeah, I mean, we sent that daylighting letter a while ago, and I think, as I recall, we were kind of general about it there because we wanted to sort of give DOT the opportunity to respond with like, hey, look, this community board's asking for this. Maybe let's come up with a plan. Between then and now, I mean, maybe some of that has been done. And so I see, and thank you, John, for doing a lot of legwork here for sure. Like, I don't see why perhaps we use these locations, and again, ideally with like a kind of heat map for like hotly requested spots as a jumping off point for us to maybe through the board office be like, hey, look, can we just see, I see your head nodding, Florence, but I'm not sure what the issue is here. Like, why can't we perhaps—
Can I tell you, is it okay?
Yeah.
Through the chair? Do I have permission through the chair?
Are you going to tell us why your head is nodding?
Well, I do that when I'm writing. No, all of these are constituent requests. Everything this gentleman did, he didn't have to do. On Monday, he could have sent our office, the community board office, a request for daylighting on Astoria Boulevard, the north, south, east, and west corner. The following week, he could say a block up, and every single one of these would go as an individual request, and then they would be processed by DOT far faster. When you, as a committee, try to make this overall huge request, it's a multi-million-dollar request. And the response from DOT will take years.
That's a very good point.
If John were to send me on Monday the first request, and then the following Monday the second request, and on the following Monday the third, and so on and so forth, all of these could be processed without any going online, putting up flyers. None of that is necessary. These are constituent requests. Anybody from the community can ask. Adam Fisher Cox can ask for one. Nas can ask for another. Bobby can ask for another. Shahenazad can ask for another.
Understood, Florence. I don't mean to cut you off. It's just trying to go teach somebody, tutor someone math at 8 o'clock if possible. So totally understand. Thanks.
So
I think that go ahead, Nas.
Sorry, yeah. So just to wrap up my point, because I wanted to just get a sense from Florence Because I also am aware that yes, this could have been a constituent complaint, or rather, a constituent request. Sure, any one of us could have individually asked for any one of these particular things at any given moment. So I personally don't think that, I don't think this needs to be necessarily like, if we're using John's data as a jumping off point. Like, I don't think this necessarily needs to be like, hey, let's pass a new resolution, send a new letter to ask for these constituent requests. I don't even think that's really necessary either personally, but I was just more curious to hear from Florence that like, okay, listen, yes, John could have gone individually, made these individual requests, but isn't it also nice or helpful for us to also make those requests, not in a letter, just through Florence as a direct ask, and then, at least we flag it in a more like collected way rather than like having 60 individual requests coming from 60 individual constituents, which was just my main idea.
Right, understood. And Florence, you have a response to that?
Yeah, cost-wise, you'll never get everything you want that way. If you do them individually, you'll get them far faster, and that's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. If Adam were to give me one, Dominic were to give me one, and you were to give me one, it would come in far faster than if we were to put 20, like what you guys did on the capital expense with the bike racks. If every week on a Monday, somebody asked me for a bike rack at Broadway Station, Ditmar Station, Dutch Kill Station, you would already probably have the studies in. But because you guys put it in on the capital expense, you're not going to see it for maybe 5 cycles of the budget, if it happens.
Okay.
Well, because they spread the money out throughout the entire borough, not just our board.
Sure. Understood.
And
There's probably some logic in talking about doing both. So great.
Yeah, and so sorry, just one more quick response to Florence. And I say that, if like, hey, Florence, we want to send you a bunch of hotspots, whatever, like we want to make this request. And your point's well taken regarding individual requests moving through quicker. But I would be of the understanding that like, hey, if we ask you to send a quick communication with like 20 collected locations, that like, I don't think our expectation necessarily is that we're demanding 500 daylighted spots and we will accept nothing more or less. Like, I would just think that if we asked you in this kind of, I don't want to say informal manner, but like in this kind of board office manner, that, yeah, it's implied that, hey, can we just flag these 20 spots and see what happens? And, not to say that we want to make this like a multi-million-dollar, multi-month kind of endeavor. That's all.
Can I respond to a couple things, Tom?
Is that Adam? Sorry, I was looking down.
No, it's me, John Sirico.
Oh, please go ahead.
So there's a lot of things here. Okay, first and foremost, I probably submit about 10 DOT contact the commissioner forms a day. I love bugging this agency to do bollards and do stop signs and do speed bumps and all those things. And that
you're my hero.
Know that process very well. From what I'm aware, and Joe, please correct me if I'm wrong, there actually is no service request mechanism for daylighting that exists in the city. When that happens, you usually have to ask, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there isn't. I would have been daylighting left and right if that was the case. But that's a more recent, this was kind of pegged to the administration's 1,000 intersection promise a year, which is a more recent promise. I don't think it was because of service requests that all Broadway got daylighting treatment, right? This is something that has to be kind of corridor wide. It can be done in kind of an expansive way. And from what I'm aware, there's actually just no form you could actually do to say, we want this intersection to be daylit. It's usually a reactive thing or it's a proactive thing. Thankfully, DOT took the proactive with Broadway. But correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I could speak more about it. So there's several different ways that daylighting can get implemented on an intersection. So first is with our street improvement projects, like with the presentation we just went through. That's where when we have a design like a protected bike lane, daylighting comes standard with all the intersections. And a lot of our other SIP projects, even if it doesn't include a protected lane, they do try to go for daylighting where possible. There's also the ability to make the request, as you said. You mentioned making the request. It is possible you can make daylighting requests through a web form. It's just the categories for each request can be a little confusing. So you would have to do it under signs. And then that's how you can, and then you put in the description, I would like to make, a no standing zone for daylighting at this intersection. And it will get handled appropriately if you put it in that way.
Great.
And so other ways daylighting can get put in is, as you said, last year DOT made the announcement, we want to daylight 1,000 intersections citywide. And we made good progress on that. And that was, the way that got decided was based on intersection geometry and the data we have for crashes and a ton of other factors such as bus and truck routes and all kinds of things like that. So that's another way that can get added. And finally, we do have those corridor-wide treatments like everyone was mentioning on Broadway. So the group that just did that presentation, our research implementation and safety group, they are the ones that focus on, crash data, vision zero data citywide, and they try to, focus their efforts on some of the most dangerous spots in the city. So that's part of how that project came to be. They analyzed Broadway as a corridor and decided that was an intervention they wanted to do there. So it can come from, daylighting comes from multiple different ways. It comes from both internally and externally. And it's a goal the agency wants to keep going with as much as possible and as resources allow.
Thanks, Joe.
Adam, your hands up.
Yeah, I guess we're talking around it a bit, but just to ask bluntly, Joe, if the letter that Dom just shared on the screen, if you got a copy of that, would that be useful to you and be able to go into some sort of system and list an informal list of priority places for you? Or is everything that doesn't go through the aforementioned things that you said kind of acknowledged, but essentially put aside and not put into the system?
You're essentially asking how the request gets made?
I'm basically asking, I think a lot of us have said, like, we're not expecting a multi-million-dollar project to implement all of these at once. Can we just email you that letter? And if we email you that letter, will that be productive in any way? Versus it seems a little ridiculous to me to say that as the community board, the best we can do is ask constituents to individually submit 311 requests for all of these intersections. I think we should be taking community feedback, coalescing it as John did, and hopefully passing that along to the people who can take action on that. So if the answer is that it'll essentially go into the shredder, that's useful to know, but I suspect it's somewhat useful if you can get a copy of that letter. And then in addition, if folks want to submit 311 requests as well, they could do that. But I just wanted to confirm with you.
Yeah, of course. So, obviously I'm not gonna tell the committee what they can and can't do. But I actually do recommend, making individual requests for these. You are free as a committee to make those, area-wide requests like the ones that was made last year and something with this letter. It still gets reviewed anyway by the team, but will essentially be packaged in as, a list of locations that are suggested. It won't be as cut and dry as, analyzing this one intersection, deciding if it's going to be there. Because, we're essentially looking at intersections citywide. So if we get a large, a very general request for daylighting, it will not be handled essentially the same way as if it was an individual request. So it will still obviously be looked at in a similar fashion, but it will essentially be put down as, these are the suggested intersections that we would like to see. And so it might get handled in a different way in the sense, as I said, with the city, analyzing intersections citywide to meet a goal, those intersections on that list could be considered when trying to reach those goals. But it will likely not be handled in a similar way, like they go down the list to analyze each intersection directly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we want to get like super specific about that.
Yeah, that's super helpful to understand. So I mean, Dom, I guess then my personal recommendation, I think we've been talking about this, is there's no harm in sending this letter along so the DOT has it, but I think we can encourage, maybe once we get this information from John about kind of what were the most popular stops, and encourage not just us, but also members of the community, John as well, to submit these 311 requests through Florence, through the portal, so that kind of the numbers pile up. But I don't see any harm in sending this letter along too, so that that information is available to DOT.
In response to that, Joe, When you see an intersection that is like an intersection has 4 corners, right? That need daylighting. So would it help if the letter was a little more specific, northbound, southbound? Because do you ever install one daylight, or do you always install multiple daylightings on an intersection? How does that work structurally?
Yeah, so when you make those kind of requests, it is helpful to give as much detail as possible, because there has been some instances where, someone will make a request and, I would say I would like some turning clearance for this intersection and only that gets fulfilled. So it is helpful to say like specifically which corners can get put in. And but in general, the whole intersection gets looked at regardless. If you're requesting daylighting specifically. It's just every intersection is unique, so it's very dependent on what can and can't be put in based on a lot of the factors there.
Right, and I hope it's still Evie, I'll definitely get to you right next. It's probably pretty obvious where the heavy traffic is and where the blind spots are regarding the turning, so I hear you. Evie?
Yeah, sorry, my internet went out when there was talking going on, so I might have missed something, but I guess 2 questions for Joe. One is, if someone puts in a request, do you then encourage other people to put in the same request as well? Like, does that have any impact on whether or not DOT is considering? And second of all, so I live near Broadway, so it's been great to see the stuff happening there, but like, what are the next plans for this community board in terms of daylighting? Is that just it? Or is there anything else that's being planned as well? You might have mentioned it, but like I said, I fell off.
Yeah, of course. I like to joke that the work's never ending for us. So there's that I can definitely check in with the teams that handle that project if there's any other specific corridors or areas of the CV that we'd be targeting. And also when you are making requests, we do study it thoroughly. So let's say for example, if you request like, a stop sign. So that has essentially like a time limit when it does get studied, and if it does get approved or denied, there's a certain amount of time that would need to pass before we come back and study it again. And that applies to most of the requests that we do have. So when I wouldn't let that discourage someone from making it another request for it. It's helps push things through regardless. So it's not so cut and dry over how many times you can make a request, but most of the time when there is an answer, that's the answer for the time being.
Thanks, Joe.
So regardless of how many people have put in that request, I'm asking Joe.
Well, that's completely dependent on the request being made. But we can have a discussion if there is specific things that you would want to talk to about for that.
Nas, your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, last one for me, and it's a super quick but a little wonky one. So, Joe, if I could just ask you, just so that I'm clear, you're saying that even if whether it's, let's say, 30 let's say, I don't know, whatever, let's say it's 10 spots, 10 specific constituent requests for daylighting, right? You're saying that those get processed differently than if we ask Florence to say, hey, Florence, can you just send a quick letter to DOT about these 10 spots? Is that what you're saying?
If you're asking for one specific spot or like a cluster of spots, you're saying?
No, like let's say the difference between 10 individual constituents making 10 individual requests for spots versus us as the committee telling Florence, hey, we have this cluster of 10 spots. Can you just email DOT about them that we're asking for daylighting here? Like, are those handled differently on your end internally?
Well, it depends on how it comes in, if it's coming in as a separate request or not.
No, Joe, it would come in I'm sorry, please, I think it's a really good question.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know the answer, but I think what Nas is saying is, for example, if 10 different 311s or requests came in individually from the public for 10 different, 1 times 10 intersections, boom, you've got that. Now, let's say you get a letter from the board, which has a list of the same 10 intersections. Where do those requests go from there, right, Nas?
Yeah, well, let me rephrase this to be simpler. It sounds like, if I'm not
Lawrence, I see your hand. You'll be next.
Yeah, that if I'm not misunderstanding, is that it sounds like DOT and maybe Florence also prefers individual requests for any one particular instance of, let's say we're talking about daylighting today, as opposed to the transportation committee sending like a punch list of 10 specific spots that we know we would like to have a request made. Am I right or wrong in that?
So whether or not that these are sent individually or sent as one cluster on DOT's end, at least, if I get, say, a letter that has 10 intersections listed on it, we're going to be logging that as 10 separate requests. Like if they are specific locations, because,
Okay.
and if you do send, a citywide or area region-wide request, that will get handled. But if they are specific intersections, that's how we will be handling that.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
as I imagined, it would be more efficient to just have a very specific request from the board office being like, hey, here's 10 daylight intersections. Can we handle this? Like as I mentioned, it just seems, it sounded weird and perhaps a bit inefficient that there was a preference to have like 10 separate or 30 separate distinct requests to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. So I think we have the answer. I think I have the answer now, and thank you.
What is that answer? Which is more efficient, Nas?
If we have a cluster of 10 specific requests that we would like Florence to send to Joe and DOT, that DOT would then process those as 10 specific requests at the end.
Right, but I don't think that to me, that's equal than Joe getting 10 random, requests on the same day. It's equal to me.
But we're not asking for an all or nothing situation. We're just trying to get in as many requests at once and then have them treated, as they need.
Well, let's put it this way, Joe. If you got a letter, 100 letters that all asked for the same 10 intersections, Joe, those would be treated as 10 intersections with 100 requests. That's obviously more significant than 10 intersections with one request each.
I'd have to talk with my office how something like that would get handled, because some requests are handled by me, but I would have to confirm with our administrative staff how that gets handled.
Sure. Florence?
So I would have to take all this. I would have to take all this back. So
okay, Florence.
Dom, I've been doing this a lot longer than Joe. No disrespect to Joe. I am 100% certain each individual request gets done faster than group requests. And also when constituents reach out to me, there's very specific information that the board office needs. So a lot of times people email the office and they won't include their phone number, and I'll have to write back to them and ask them to include their personal information, because we need to know who, what, where, when, and why. So if you want the specific location, you have to tell me the northeast corner, because if they go to the northwest corner, they will not do the northeast corner. They will not look across the street. So in the past, board members were the eyes and ears of the community. You're here to put in these requests, not to 311, but through the board office. Whenever you put in a request, the board office puts it directly to DOT. And I talk to Joe 8 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock at night. I follow up with him. And, sometimes, unfortunately, the agency takes far too long to get back to us. But the best way, if you really want the work done, is to do it individually. If you want to make a statement that our board is doing this, you put the 10 in on one document. But if you really want the area daylighted, you do it individually. So let's make believe Ditmars by my office on 46th Street was a 4-lane two in each direction, and we wanted to put daylighting in. You would write to the board office, you would call me, you would say, I want the north, south, east, and west corner of 46th Street and Ditmars. We want curb extensions for daylighting. We would then write to DOT telling them this request has come into our office. Please do a study and let us know if this can be implemented.
To do a study to see what's implemented. I mean,
And if it's a
obviously,
safety issue, by law, DOT has to implement them. And doing them individually, you will really get them.
understood.
Putting them,
We hear you. We hear you. Wait, I have a question. Florence, give us an idea of how many daylighting.
zero. Only the one that I wrote for the child who died by all the schools, and the one that Adam wrote after the one that I wrote, but we have had no requests whatsoever for daylighting, none.
Yeah, and
The first one coming in was John's letter.
And as Florence said, it is a little more standard and effective to have it as individual requests with as much details as possible.
Sure. Okay, we got that, guys. Let's move on from this. I want to kind of touch base with John. John, is it possible that your data does differentiate the direction of the like the corner of the request or not? Probably doesn't.
You can look into it.
Can we talk offline about looking at your survey and maybe strengthen it, and maybe we can get another 100 answers in the next few, just to kind of drill down to it. Maybe we can work on it that way as well. I mean, not to put this on pause at all, but just to kind of make it a little more precise, I guess.
Yeah, I think where I'm kind of just struck is that I've requested daylighting at corners. I've been denied by DOT. Broadway was done entirely without community board requesting it. So I have my marching orders. I feel like I know what I'm going to do next with getting the kind of heat map together and the kind of intersections of where it's at. But yeah.
Can I just jump in real quick? Why don't you just break up John's letter between the board members, and each of you take a couple of the intersections, and over a period of time, we have enough people on this committee that it could be broken down and submitted in a reasonable amount of time. Just take John's letter, pick it up between you.
Yeah, I think
and submit them.
I think that I personally and all of us might pause on that workaround. It's definitely a workaround. It may be a very successful and the most efficient workaround. So it may be done in parallel to anything else that we're trying to do here. But definitely let's, John, let's do that, and let's see. Let's stay in touch. Adam, can I give you the last comment, Adam, on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Up to you.
If anyone else has any other comments on this topic, put your hand up now, or forever hold your peace. Adam.
I think I take Florence's point that all these tickets will be more effective individually. I think we all as individuals can do that through the board, through the portal, through whatever. I have not heard a single comment tonight to indicate that there's any harm that comes from sending a letter with a bullet pointed list of all the intersections that John has put into this letter. We should just do that. And additionally, we can figure out the next steps of whether we want to divide these up amongst all of us and submit all the tickets or what. But we got this information into this meeting, and I think it would be a bit of a us not doing our duty of passing along constituent requests, and I haven't heard any reason why we shouldn't do that. So that would be my recommendation.
All right. So now we're going to move on from the procedure of notifying the board on each individual intersection, and talk about if something in parallel gets done. And I'll be away next week. I would like to kind of talk to John offline on a few things before. So I don't know if tonight, Adam, we will, or let me actually say, Adam, what do you suggest we do tonight regarding this letter? Keeping in mind that I think it's a little vague, the letter, with all due respect. And I just, I'd love to just tighten it up a little better if we could, even if it took a month to do. I'm happy to spend the time in the next month and kind of bring something with a little more structure to Joe in April.
I mean, honestly, Dom, I disagree on the vagueness of it. I mean, I think the letter that John wrote has a lot of information in it. The information we need to pass to DOT is we have had constituent requests for daylighting at the following intersections. Bulleted list, done. We can send that along. I think there's the separate piece of this letter is a useful tool to convince us that this needs to happen. I feel like we're convinced. I think the important thing is getting this yellow chart to DOT. And because there's no kind of it's not like if we do this we can't do another thing. I kind of don't see the reason not to copy paste that. If there needs to be a vote on it, we could vote at the full board, but I feel like Florence could just send this along as, you know, a constituent has reached out and I'm passing along this thing that he reached out with. That's my opinion on it.
Well, then structurally, Joseph, if you got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 times 3, 24, blocks here with multiple intersections on it. Well, these, there's so many, Adam, to be prioritized. You know what I mean? Is there any way that we could get with John Sirico about numbering these?
I would just say real quick, I'm going to jump on Adam's point as well. I don't think this is like a quote unquote statement letter that we need to be sending. I think this is just like a punch list, like super cut and dry, like bam, bam, bam. And then additionally, we will do the individual requests as needed. Like this doesn't need to be like a resolution type thing. That's all.
No, I'm not saying it should be a resolution type. I think it should just have it should be in an order of whoever makes the most complaints. It's just we're throwing it all in a box and saying, here, DOT. All these many intersections. To me, I wish it was prioritized. John, can you spend a day or two to just number these boxes?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll do that, Adam. We'll get a revised letter. I see your hand there, Florence. 1 second. We'll get a revised letter, and we have the verbiage and we have the map. So, okay, if that's what we send, we can send it, no problem at all. So then when, right? So then, John, do you think we can talk offline and maybe get something? I'm away for 9 days on Sunday, so I would like to just see numbers on them. Is there a chance maybe whenever we get that from you, you probably need a few weeks. So Adam, can we take this next committee meeting and then move on it actively then?
I can do that in a night.
Okay.
Yeah, that takes me 2 seconds. I just
From your data.
Yeah, I can do that pretty quickly.
Okay. All right, do it. Okay. So then, 1 second, Florence. I definitely see your hand there. I just want to kind of wrap up what our action is here regarding the letter, because Adam seems to be wanting to send something tomorrow. This letter, Adam, and I just think if we could get John's cleaning it up in terms of an order, then I'd like to send it. So if we can get that from John, let's do that. All right, Adam? Okay, Florence?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I just think
all John has to do, if he is in agreement with you, is number it and send it to the board office. The committee never has to get it back. If John sent it to the office, I could send it out tomorrow. This isn't a committee item. This is a constituent complaint. It's nice that you're debating all of this, but this can go straight out. This is normal community board DOT work.
It is. You're absolutely right. Except we haven't gotten any daylight requests from the community.
But you would never get it anyway. It would normally come to the
but my
door.
point is you haven't gotten them. You have not gotten them. John's gotten them. He went out and he got this whole survey done.
Yeah, but John doesn't contact the office. John made the statement. He goes through the 311 and the 311 app. If more constituents came through the office, DOT would be more proactive.
Well, do you have can you get any DOT info, Florence, about daylighting requests that didn't come into you but came in through 311?
No.
Can you ask?
It's privacy issues, Dominic. I can't.
I'm not asking for who sent them. It's
Ask Joe if he can give them to you.
Joe,
He's
can you
here.
get 311 requests for daylighting from? Do you have that data? And once again, not the names of the people.
Like, are we talking number of requests?
No. The specific information about what intersections are being requested on.
Well, like the way it would normally work is that I would mainly be able to check on request if you have like a tracking number for them. It's like it would take some work to compile any existing request within the board. So
okay.
Wouldn't we be able to get that through open data?
Let's ask Kian.
The number 311 requests.
I would have to confirm about that, but
Okay. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wait for John to give a revised prioritized list, and then we're gonna ask him to send it to Florence, and Florence is gonna send it to DOT, and we're never gonna see it again.
No, I think the committee should also see it. I don't think it.
I'm kidding.
The committee might also want to see it as well.
The committee would like to
I
see it
would,
again. That'd be
but-
great. But I'm hoping to personally you see it from John, so I think the whole committee should see it. So Adam, I guess the time frame we're gonna have to see if we want to meet again next month and see it, or you know what I mean, how that would go.
Can I clarify when it comes in? I forward it to the committee, but I send it directly to DOT the day it comes in, or you're gonna hold it over another month?
Okay, that's fine.
I think it's
Which
okay
is
to
it?
immediately
I'll send it
send
to you,
it
Florence.
person.
what?
Am I sending it out, or are we holding it over another month? I'm not clear. I mean, I could send it out tomorrow, literally.
Why don't we have John send it to Dominic, you, and me, and then
I'll send it to you guys. He can send it to me and I'll send it to you guys. That's
you
not
send
the
it to
problem.
Dominic and I as well. Thanks.
Yeah, we have John's email. Thanks a lot. All right, so guys, I do want to step off. I could leave the meeting open if there's any other discussions. So we're gonna close this discussion about the daylighting letter written by John Sirico. But first of all, we're gonna thank you, John, for taking the time to do this, and also just to take the time to send, to do all the other things that you claim you do. The 10 per, you're my hero. If you do 10 311s a day, you really are. You really, really are. So, and Joseph, thank you so much for sticking in with us to 8:15. We know you didn't have to do that. We know there are better places you want to be, and always good to see you again. And expect a letter from Florence in the coming days. Any closing words, Joe? You're muted, Joe.
Oh, thank you. Again, of course, happy to be here. Appreciate all the board's, work and enthusiasm and collaboration with all our projects and day-to-day tasks. Thank you, Florence, for working with you on a daily basis, getting things done. And I'll see you all soon. If there's any other, additional feedback about the project, just let us know through the office, and I'll also be sharing the presentation as soon as possible.
Thanks very much. I also would like to thank Alexis Spikas from Family for Safe Streets coming on and telling us about her organization and their support of daylighting. And I also want to say hello to Elizabeth Arion, who came late, but who's a board member, and happy to see you here. So is there any other topics of new or old business for committee members? Shahanaz.
Yeah, only I want to share the good news. The 36th Avenue stuff for the bus stop came back. The seniors happy, the community happy, the student happy. We signed petition and we were able to return it back.
I wish Joe hadn't left. So you're talking about 21st Street and 36th Avenue.
Yes, both sides returned back. We signed the petition and we worked really hard in this with Ravenswood and everyone, and we was able asking everyone sign please, and the seniors really happy, the student, because even my daughter now happy because finally she can go take this stuff again.
That's great. That's you're it's what we sound like what we should be doing. So great, good news. Any other news, old or new business, or medium? New news getting old. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second. Thanks, Antonella. All right, everybody. I won't be there next week, but I'll see you next month.
Take care. Have a good time.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
I'm indifferent. Studios, thank you for your service. Please